It was just before the 2024 Tour de France presentation that we heard that a new breakaway league was being discussed among some of men's cycling's biggest teams. Here at RadioCycling, we then also heard that Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, or PIF, investors in Newcastle United and Live Golf, was one possible investor in the project. Now, there's no doubt that this is becoming a serious proposal. We can now reveal, too, that in the past month, talks have continued, a prospectus has been circulated, and most World Tour teams have now signed non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, regarding the One Cycling proposal. But first, Chris, bring us up to speed with a quick reminder of the basics.
Absolutely. So One Cycling actually dates back quite a few years to around 2020 to 2021. It's a brainchild of Richard Plugge, who is the general manager of Jumbo-Visma, and Zdeněk Bakala, who owns the Soudal Quickstep team. They essentially just want the teams to have more money. This is an argument as old as cycling itself. Now, there are several major teams involved. They are Jumbo and Quickstep, as you would imagine, Ineos, Little Trek, EF Education, Easy Post, and Bora Hansgrohe. Now, the central premise of One Cycling is to create, not necessarily a breakaway league, but to create a new structure within cycling, which would be called the Champions League. Now, that would be 100 to 120 race days. There'd be no overlapping races. And the ambition, Jeremy, is that this would start in 2026. And just before I go back to you, I remind people that the UCI are on board. ASO, the promoters of the Tour de France, have held discussions as well.
Okay, so we're back up to date. So what's the new news on One Cycling?
So, as I just said there, and as we mentioned in our October the 27th special podcast on this, it started as a proposal between 6 teams, and the plan was that they would eventually tell the rest of the teams. Now, we understand that most, but not all, of the 18 World Tour teams have signed or are about to sign an NDA. They received these NDAs in the past few days. Some received them last weekend, last Saturday and Sunday. Some only received them on Tuesday, where we're recording this podcast on Thursday. It basically means that this NDA, in as few words as possible, is that the teams who sign these NDAs just can't say anything about it. They have to keep their mouths completely shut.
So they're kind of signing the NDAs. I mean, it's standard you'd expect when there's a proposal that obviously is an industry secret that they don't want that to be shared. But the mere fact that they are signing NDAs is in itself a significant move forward.
Well, when I was informed of this first, that was my reaction, and then some more teams were informing me of it. But it actually appears it sounds more important than what it actually is. All the NDA is basically doing is just making sure that teams don't share this information with people like myself, or you, Jeremy, or you, Pete. One team said to me that they were only signing the NDA in the hope that they will learn more about the project. They still don't know anything about it, and they know nothing more in the last 4 weeks. Another said that they've signed it, but still they have no more information. They also said that there's been no meetings about this. Another team went further, asking if the information promised by signing the NDA is actually anything substantial. Is it actually anything concrete? Or is it still just to say, hey, we have this great idea, do you want to join? The theory goes that teams are basically being strong-armed into signing the NDA so then they can receive information. If you don't sign this NDA, well, sorry, you don't get the info.
So teams are still divided then, as far as we know?
Absolutely. One team said to me it's pretty clear that it's still a private club of teams involved, even though new teams are being invited or being showed these proposals. One team explicitly said to me that as a collective, the teams are still not happy. And to be honest, Jez, I got the sense from speaking with quite a few that they're so desperate. They're so desperate for change. They almost just want to put this issue to bed that they'll just sign the NDA to hear more, see what happens, and then we'll just move on from it. There's a lot of division, and I think there's a lot of anger at the people who are creating this One Cycling proposal.
So is anything more, other than the information we've got about the NDAs, has anything more been said publicly about this in recent weeks?
So we knew already that the UCI, obviously the world governing body, were in favour of this. Now, David Lapartien, who was the president of the UCI, gave an interview to the French press last weekend, and he was bemoaning how there's 5 big, rich, powerful men's teams, saying that is essentially a second division in the World Tour, and he's saying that that's not good for the sport. He said, and I quote, "The Super League idea comes from the same thinking that nothing is centralised in cycling. He then added that only ASO, RCS, who run the Giro d'Italia and Flanders Classics, they can negotiate TV rights individually. So it's better for the sport to bring all races together to generate more income. Now, there was one quote from Leparti in particular on this, where he said, when we cut the rights, essentially when we divide the rights between each race organiser, it creates less value as a whole. And he completely understands why the teams want to get more dividends from the investments into the sport. And he says that that's also compatible with what the UCI want to do. But there's a bit of a side angle to this as well, Jez and Pete, in that there's a few people suspecting that maybe the UCI are playing politics just to keep people on their side. Perhaps the UCI are not actually keen on this. They're just trying to placate the teams and say, well, we completely want this. Of course we do. Maybe they don't. We don't really know.
So are we going to see further developments before next season gets going?
I don't think before next season, no. The plan is to have one cycling in place before the start of the 2026 season, so they do have 2 years. But you've got to imagine we've got to see some significant progress in the next 6 to 7 months, at least before next year's Tour de France. But really, you've got to see progress before opening weekend, which is the end of February. So we've got to see some stuff happening, happening that's substantial in the next 3 months. I don't see it. That's how I'm reading the situation right now.